Welcome, everybody. And this is a part of our series, and we're calling this Fix the Friction, Turn Team Tension into Team Flow. And if you take nothing else away from this, what I'm going to tell you is this. You actually want a little bit of friction. You want a little bit of tension on your teams, but I know sometimes that's a little bit challenging. So I'm going to show you how to use that tension, those differences to your advantage. So, if you've never been on one of these with us before, I'm your host. I'm Eric. I'm a 5392, a VP here at Kolbe, and I'm one of our senior consultants. Taking care of the chat is Lori Turner. She's our director of sales. She's an 8662. And on your screen, you may also see a little logo, a little Kolbe Corp logo. That's a real person. It's not just a AI bot back there. That real person is Deani, and Deani is a 7725. She's the one that makes all of this stuff work. So everyone gets here on time. We're all logged in, all of that fun stuff. All right. So again, we're going to go ahead. We're going to get started with our content. I'm going to start with a poll, and it's a real poll this time, not just about how you get dressed. So we're going to pop that open. And what I want to know is, have you worked with someone you find frustrating in the past 3 months? Simple answers, either yes, no, or I don't work with other people. So in the past 3 months, have you worked with someone that you find frustrating? We got one vote for no, so congrats to that one person. Nice job. Good news is we have 0 votes for I don't work with other people. If you are on this and you don't work with other people, this probably is not the right webinar for you. We have lots of other ones that can be helpful, but this is all about working with others. So if you don't work with other people, yeah, this isn't the right one for you. All right, we're going to go ahead. We're going to share those results. Look like most of you have answered. And we had 2 votes for no, I have not worked with someone frustrating. And we had 22 votes that says, yes, I have worked with someone that's frustrating. So that's 92%. So almost everybody said, yes, I've worked with someone that's frustrating. That's okay. Sometimes we are frustrating to ourselves. And so I can imagine that we're all also sometimes frustrating to others. But what I can tell you is a part of the magic that any organization has is the people inside of it. That's a bit of that company's secret sauce, is how those folks work together effectively. And Steve Jobs, right? Co-founder of Apple, created all kinds of great inventions. He even says, right, great things in business are never done by one person. The iPhone basically changed everything in smartphones, and we're on, I don't know, the iPhone 17 Super Max Ultra with 6 cameras or whatever version we're on right now, right? But way back in the day when they were creating that, it wasn't just Steve Jobs putting that thing together, right? He had somebody that was designing it. He had engineers working on the software. He had engineers working on the hardware. All of those folks came together and created this invention that essentially changed the world. Regardless of what your business does, getting the people to work together effectively is how you change the world. That's how you impact your community and you serve your clients. And so, like I said, right, the secret sauce inside of an organization is how you get those people together working as a team and leveraging their various strengths. But all of us have people, as people, have a giant mix of strengths. It's almost like we all have our own unique secret sauce that makes us who we are. We call this concept the 3 parts of the mind. It goes back to ancient Greece, but essentially what it says is we have 3 buckets of strengths. First bucket of strengths that we all have are our cognitive or our thinking strengths. Then we have our feeling or our affective strengths. And then we have our conative or our doing strengths. Every one of us, me, you, Lori, Dee, the rest of us, right? We all have this combination together, and we're at our best when we get to use all of our various strengths. But I'm going to go a little bit deeper just to kind of break down what each one of these buckets of strengths really mean. So on the cognitive or the thinking side, right, it's things like natural intelligence, skills, experience. And what we found is most of us have taken some version of a cognitive assessment. You know, in the professional world, maybe you've taken a professional assessment, something like this Series 7. Or to get into college, many of us had to take either the ACT or the SAT. When I was a kid, I had to do those Scantron fill in the bubble tests because my teacher wanted to make sure that I was paying attention when she was talking to us about volcanoes or ancient history or whatever it was that we were learning that week. Or maybe you took a short form intelligence test, something like the Wonderlic. But either way, these are measuring various components of your cognitive strengths. Again, we've all done these assessments, so we have a pretty good handle on what our cognitive strengths are. But there's this second part. Second part is the affect or the feeling component. What lives there are things like motivation, values, personality. And so most of these assessments that you're familiar with out there in the world measure the affective part of the mind in various forms. So maybe you've taken something like the Strengths Finder or Predictive Index, Myers-Briggs, DISC, Working Genius, Culture Index. There are thousands and thousands of personality type of assessments out there, and it's all great information to know, right? You need to know if you're more of an extroverted person or an introverted person. Some of us have a general idea, but these assessments can help guide you and help you lean into those strengths that you have. Again, both of those are strengths, whether you're introverted or extroverted. Maybe you're a steady, stable, patient person like Diani, who's on the call. Or maybe you're wildly impatient like me and Lori, or somewhere in between. That's okay, right? All of us use those strengths to our advantage. And so you should know what your affective strengths are. However, there's this third bucket of strengths that most of us aren't really aware of. And the reason for that is we've been doing it our whole lives. Since we were little kids, we've been taking action in a particular way. That's the conative part of the mind. All right, so when we look at the conative part of the mind, another way to think of it is if it's a random Tuesday and I need help with something, and I call Lori and I say, "Hey, Lori, I need your help with this." I can predict how she's going to help me with that because she's an 8662. She's probably going to hit me with some questions. Or maybe after I say, "Hey, Lori, here's my problem," she's going to go off and do some research. Or as we're talking, she's looking stuff up online because she has to gather that information first. That's hard. That's part of how she gets stuff done. And she's been doing that since she was little Lori running around on the playground, jumping off swings, whatever it was that little Lori did. Right? Now that she's grown up, Lori, she's still doing it. So the conative part of the mind is all about how you will take action. So in a broad sense, that's what we're looking at with Kolbe is strictly just the conative part of the mind. We do not know anything about your cognitive strengths, your level of intelligence. I don't know anything about your personality, your motivations, your values. What we know is if you have those four numbers from your Kolbe result, we can predict how you're going to solve problems. I'm going to pause for a second. Lori, any questions that we need to address or anything we need to tackle before I move forward?
Yep, I'm going to put the three parts of the mind stuff in the chat in just a second. Tony had said what didn't give credibility to me was that each MO was decided on 9 questions because the nature of the questions, you could easily answer them differently if you did it at a different time. Other psychological tests I can read have over 100 questions, so deciding between two answers is less relevant to the final result. So I
Yes.
just
So I'm gonna oversimplify a little bit, Tony, but Lori is gonna put in the chat a link to our validity and our reliability, so you can read through the case studies in depth. Um, as you go through and you answer those 36 questions, by design, we put you in a forced choice scenario where you have to pick a most and you have to pick a least. There were probably some questions where you thought to yourself, I wouldn't do any of these, but we made you pick a most and a least. As you went through, essentially you answered some questions in a fact finder way, or in a follow through way, or in a quick start way. And based on how you answered those and the consistency of how you answered similar questions, that's how we identified your MO, your four numbers. In regards to the number of questions, this is built for business people. And so we worked with our research partners to narrow it down as much as possible and say, hey, what's the least amount of questions that we can ask to still get valid, reliable results? And what we determined was 36 is the minimum amount. I wish we could get it down to like 3 or 4. That would make my life, Lori's life, so much easier. But unfortunately, what we've determined so far is the minimum we need to get accurate, valid data is 36 questions. But yeah, great point, and keep those great questions coming. All right, so right, you take those 36 questions, you answer most and least, and then at the end, you get something that looks like this. You get those 4 colorful bars, and you get 4 numbers. Essentially, what we're trying to identify is your MO, your modus operandi. If that term sounds familiar, congrats. You probably watch serial killer documentaries on Netflix, right? Because whenever the FBI or the police, they catch the bad guy, part of the reason that they catch the bad guys, the bad guy does his or her crimes in a consistent way. They do it the same kinds of things over and over again. We all do that in our lives as well. We take action, we solve problems in a purposeful way. And so if you're robbing a bank, you have an MO. If you're growing and developing your team, you have an MO and everywhere in between, but it's all about how we get stuff done. So what I want you to know is all of us have those exact same four colorful bars, but where we vary is we have different numbers. One of the great things about Kolbe is it's not that a 1 is better than a 10 or a 10 is better than a 1. What we're simply trying to figure out is on this continuum, where do your particular strengths fall? And so if you're an 8 in something, that's an awesome strength. If you're a 2 in something, that is just as amazing strength, just used in a different way. So all of us have those 4 ways of taking action: fact finder, follow through, quick start, and implementer. Where we vary is how we deploy those strengths. And you can flex a little bit. So let's say you're an 8 in fact finder like Lori. That means your natural strength is to specify. However, if I come to Lori and I'm like, hey, Lori, can you help me simplify this? She absolutely can do that, right? It's painful for her, but she's a smart lady. She figures it out and she will help me simplify something. Where it becomes a little bit challenging is if all day long, all Lori did was try to simplify stuff, she would get wiped out because her natural way of solving problems is to specify. And that's true, again, in all 4 of these modes. You can flex for a short amount of time, but over the long run, day after day after day, whatever your 4 numbers are, that's how you get stuff done. So now we're going to decode your specific Kolbe results quickly. So fact finder, again, is all about gathering and sharing information. If you're in that 7 to 10 range, you need to do a little bit of research, do some homework. Maybe it is looking something up, reading a blog. Maybe it's asking a whole bunch of questions, but either way, you need to gather that info. And because you've done this since you were a little kid, you built a vault of information inside of your head. So you also go through that vault and say, what have we done in the past that's similar to this that can help me solve this problem going forward? On the other side, what if you're a 1, 2, or 3? You still gather info, you just do it in a different way. You take a step back, get the big picture, the 50,000-foot view, right? Is what we're doing right now got us going in generally the same direction that we want to go? Okay, that's enough. Let's keep moving in that general direction. Also have a gift to kind of cut through this complexity. If I throw a bunch of detailed information at you, you boil it down to a single bullet point, a phrase, its essence, something like that. But you can probably guess if in real life I put a 10 in the room with a 1, there's going to be some tension or some frictions. And a lot of times on teams, this is a part of where it happens because we do things in different ways. You have somebody who shares a whole bunch of information, and you have someone on the other end whose eyes is glazing over because they're getting overloaded with info, right? So how do you bridge the gap between those 2 5s or between those 2 sides? Grab somebody like me in that 4, 5, and 6 range. I describe us as only needing enough information to be dangerous. Couple of key bullet points, couple of key phrases, we're good to go. So now we have a 10 and a 1 in the room. That 10 is going to share a whole bunch of information with us. As 5s, we're going to sort through it, turn to the 1 and say, all right, now what he said is this. Then the 1 replies, we add some color, some context, turn to that 10 and said, all right, now what she said is this, and this. It turns out actually on any given team, you want all of these strengths. And I'm going to show you why you want that and how to use it to your advantage later on. But that's fact finder. Then we have follow through. It's about organizing and designing. If you're in that 7 through 10 range, problem drops in your lap, you naturally see in terms of, all right, I got to do step 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. You help us create systems, processes. You also build a plan. Here's our plan for how we're going to accomplish this thing. And generally, you then build a backup plan and a backup plan for the backup plan. On the other end, you have folks like me in that 1, 2, or 3 range. If you come to me and say, hey, Eric, here's our 5-step process for how we do this, I'm going to cut it down to 2 or 3 steps. And then when I do it again, I'm probably going to mess with the order a little bit because I need to adapt and flex and change. This is helpful in unforeseen circumstances. We thought we were going this way. Now we're going this way. We thrive in that environment. But again, in real life, you put a 10 and the 1 in a room together, there's probably going to be some tension because that 10 lays out this really elegant, thought through plan. And then I roll in and I don't follow any of that. And it feels a little personally disrespectful. How do you bridge that gap? Again, folks in that 4, 5, and 6 range. Because your gift is you take a look at what's already created and you naturally spot inefficiencies. You know what? We can tweak this here and save ourselves 10 hours a week. If we make this slight modification, I think we're going to be 15% more efficient, something like that. On a team, you want all of these. We got to have systems and processes or we have chaos. But if we're so rigid that we never change, we're going to miss opportunities. And we got to figure out how do we make the stuff that we're doing just a little bit faster, a little bit smarter. All right. The next one, that green one called Quick Start. It's about dealing with risk and uncertainty. If you're in that 7 through 10 range like me, we tend to jump out of the plane and then figure out how we're going to land on the way down, right? We're going to build the plane after we jump off the cliff, that kind of stuff. We also do is experiment. We try things. Sometimes it goes great, sometimes it blows up, but either way, we're going to experiment and try things. Also, if you need my help, I'm going to throw a bunch of ideas at you. Some are great, some are terrible, but I have to get them out of my head first. Then we can start to sort through them. On the other end, if you're in that 1, 2, or 3 range, I want to say a genuine thank you. So Diani on our team is a 2 in Quick Start. So D, thank you. The reason I'm saying thank you to D and the rest of you in that 1 to 3 range is you keep people like me out of trouble. When we have our latest, greatest, brilliant idea, you naturally spot this could go wrong. You're going to break this thing. You're going to upset this customer set. You see some of the potential downsides. So you minimize the risks. And also you minimize the chaos from the constant change that sometimes we create. But again, 1 in 10 in a room, right? Probably going to be some friction. So 4s, 5s, and 6s bridge that gap. We come with our latest, greatest idea if we're in that 7 to 10 range. And you 4 through 6s, like Lori, do a little bit of homework or some due diligence. If Lori, after doing her homework, realizes, yeah, we have a pretty high likelihood of pulling this thing off, I can totally sell Lori on a brand new idea. But if, as she's doing her homework, she realizes we have a 2% chance of this working, but if it goes wrong, we're going to bankrupt the company, Lori's probably going to press the pause button and be like, yeah, this one's not worth it. And again, on a team, right? You want all of these. Sometimes we have to take those risks, but sometimes we have to push back against risk and we got to figure out which ones are the ones that are worth taking. Finally, that yellow one called implementer. So think of implements, a scalpel, a hammer, screwdriver, even this little clicker thingy that I'm using to go through my slides. These are tools that you use to get your job done. If you're in that 7 through 10 range, you naturally build stuff as a part of your problem solving. You need to get your hands on it, touch it, taste it, feel the texture. Also, you create really high quality solutions that are going to stand the test of time. So be thankful for these folks because they create the roads that we drive on, the buildings that we live in. If you blow your knee out, hopefully your surgeon has a 7 through 10 implementer, right? So they can fix it. It's a high quality repair, so you don't have a limp for the rest of your life. On the other end, 1s, 2s, and 3s, we don't need to touch it or taste it. You describe something on a call like this, you can get the picture in your head. You can get the gist or the mental model of, all right, I see what he's talking about, and I can start to see that vision. We work in the intangible world. Great example of something that's intangible, company culture. Company culture can absolutely make or break your organization. That can be the rocket fuel that takes you to the next level, or it can be the anchor that drags down the whole ship if it's the wrong culture, but you can't actually touch it, right? If you said, hey, Eric, give me the company culture of Kolbe, I can't just like hand you a workbook or a piece of paper. You're not going to get it. It's the vibe that you get when you interact with all of us. It's the sense that you get when you walk into our front office and the lobby and all of those things and how you interact with our team. All of those are components of our culture. It's an intangible. But again, you can imagine there's a bit of a disconnect between that I have to hold it in my hands versus I can see it in my head. That's where fours, fives, and sixes come in. Your gift is you take a look and say, all right, I see the vision, I see the picture of what we're looking for. Here's how we translate it into the physical world. You know what? We want a welcoming environment. So we don't want these big, giant gray concrete walls. We want colors that are a bit more warm. Maybe we want we want half walls so we can see people's heads and their smiling faces. All of those will lead to a more inviting culture. And on a team, again, you want all of these because we're all people. We interact with the physical world. So, right, we have to figure out how do we balance all of those. All right, so that was a very quick debrief on what the heck is this Kolbe thing? What does it measure? If you want to go deeper, you absolutely can. We have lots of opportunities for you. The Activate Your A Discovery course is a great example of that. I'm going to pause. Anything we need to tackle right now, Lori?
We're doing good.
All right, awesome. Might as well steal some water while we're taking a break. All right. So we talked about what the heck is this Kolbe thing, and we've mostly been talking about you as an individual. But as we identified at the beginning of this call, all of us work with other people. Maybe it's teammates, maybe it's your boss, maybe it's vendors, whoever it is, we have to interact with others. Even as we transition to more and more of a digital world, we still have to interact with other people just digitally instead of face to face or side by side. So, working with other people is all about collaboration. If you want the easiest, most bare bones method for how do I collaborate with someone a little bit better, here's something you can do. Send them your roughly 15-page Kolbe result. So we recently updated the Kolbe results. Back in the day, they were 18, 19 pages. We have condensed it and got it down to the most important, the most critical pieces. So if you haven't checked your new one out yet, definitely log in and look at your new Kolbe result. But when you then get ready to share that, again, it's 15 pages. The chance that if you send a 15-page document to everyone you know, that all of them read it is about zero, right? No one's going to read all that. We don't have time for that. Too much stuff to do. So what's a shortcut? What's a hack that you could use? Well, the good news is you don't have to worry about it saying anything bad about you, right? Because if you look underneath where it says congratulations and your first name, it says you got a perfect score. So freely share this. It's going to tell that other person how awesome you are, all of your amazing talents that you can share with the world. Then, right, so now we're comfortable with it. We're like, yes, I'm cool with sharing it. Now what do? Our little tip or trick. You could literally copy and paste that paragraph right there and dump it into a text, an email, Teams message, whatever your preferred communication style is. And this will at least give someone a rough idea of what to expect from you, how you're going to do things. So that's like bare bones. I don't have a lot of time. I don't know what the heck this Kolbe thing means. How do I work better with other people? Share your Kolbe results, or at least copy that little paragraph there. But we can definitely go a little bit deeper and be very, very prescriptive when we're looking at two people working together or a group of people working together. So a couple of times on this call, I've mentioned Diani, who is hiding behind that Kolbe logo in our webinar here. So Diani is our marketing project manager. She makes sure that when we do webinars like this, that we get, a little banner on our website and you get an email invite. And then she makes sure that when you sign up, you actually get signed up and then you get the follow-up emails and the links and all of that stuff. And she makes sure that this PowerPoint deck looks nice and I didn't misspell something, right? So Diani is awesome at that kind of stuff and we work together all of the time. However, as you can see, just by looking at our bar charts, we're not an exact 180 from each other, but we're pretty close. However, Diani may disagree, but I think that we work together really, really well. And even though we have those wild differences, right? Because I understand what her strengths are and she understands what my strengths are. And so When we look at our results, we can actually compare them side by side. And now D knows what to expect from me. If we jump on a call, she knows I'm probably going to lead with a bunch of ideas. Hey, D, I was thinking about this. What if we, and then some wild idea, right? And I know when I jump on a call with her, she's going to hit me with a whole bunch of questions. And then she's going to start to create a checklist or a process for how we're going to execute that stuff. We're very different, but it works well because we kind of balance each other out. What she's awesome at, I need help with, and vice versa. But because of those differences, we still do butt heads sometimes. There have absolutely been times where I've changed things like 37 seconds before we went live on a webinar like this. Even though she had this elegant plan and this checklist all thought out, I still changed stuff last second. So, right, that causes a little bit of friction. How do we kind of close that gap or make it not feel as painful? Core values. Most organizations have some version of core values. If you run on EOS, you've gone through this exercise where you distill down what are the most important things to our company. For us at Kolbe, one of our core values is entrepreneurial and solutions oriented. So now D knows when I make that last second change, I'm doing it because I'm being entrepreneurial and solution oriented. I spotted or I had an idea about how we can solve a problem for our clients. And I know when she comes to me with her 37 item checklist, she's doing it because she's also trying to solve a problem for our clients or for the audience. So because we have those aligned core values, it further narrows the gap between us. It doesn't feel as painful. Then what you can do is we can give you specific guidance on how do I communicate with this person? How should I deliver messages to them? So here's a tip for me when I'm working with Diani or Lori in this case, because she is also she's an aid in fact finder. So Lori, Diani, at some times, right, they may start some debates. I don't have to jump in on those debates every time. Sometimes they just start debates because they want to debate some of the details. They need to debate some of those details. I don't have to engage all of the time. Sometimes I need to, but not always, right? That's a great tip if you work with someone who's a 7 through 10 in fact finder. Now, what are some of the worst things that I can do when I'm working with D or when I'm working with Lori? If I go to D and I say, hey, just give me the bottom line. What are we talking about? I am now putting her under stress. Can she do it? Can she perform in that environment? 100%. But I'm intentionally throwing her off her game before I'm asking her to help me. That's not good. And what happens is most of us don't do this on purpose, right? It's not intentional. We're just us. And we have our own way of doing things. Sometimes we try to impose that on others. If we have a guide for how do I communicate with this person and we share it with each other, now we can begin to adjust and it further narrows that gap. It closes those differences down. So it's very, very subtle. You almost don't notice it once you appreciate each other's differing strengths. All right. So we're going to do a quick exercise. So hopefully everybody has something to write with and something to write on. So what I'm going to ask all of you to do is take a second and I want you to write down the answer to this question. What is one tip I can give to others for working with me? And I want this specifically for you. If you need an example, my tip is start with the end. What are we trying to solve for? Because then I know I can figure out how to get us there. I just got to know what I'm trying to solve for. So take a minute, write down what is your one tip for working with you. All right, I see some folks are starting to put it in there. So Michael Bossy, when you're talking out loud, don't assume I'm delegating a project to you. Yes. So Michael, I know your MO. So you, like me, sometimes think with your mouth open. And yes, absolutely. Just because I said it doesn't mean we need to do it. Perfect. Is anyone else willing to share what their tip is? Tony is always challenging the status quo. Tony, that absolutely aligns because you think about your question earlier, right? You were questioning the status quo and saying, wait, verify that this information is correct before we can move forward. So awesome. Meredith, right? If you need something from me, give you a deadline. Fantastic. Christy, when she asks questions, don't assume she wants to change your plans. Awesome. There we go. Lori starting with the big picture. There we go. Perfect. So right? You all were able to write down what that one tip is for working effectively with you. Here's the bad news though. Most of us on this call don't work together. So while it's great that I get to know you a little bit better, Laura gets to know you a little bit better, we don't work with you all the time. So I'm going to give you a little bit of homework. And this is the homework. I want you to give that tip that you just wrote down to three people in your life. It could be your boss, your coworker, somebody that works for you. It could be your significant other. I just want you to give it to three people that are important to you and say, hey, here's one tip for working with me. And you're going to notice it's going to reduce that friction. It's going to kind of narrow the gap if you have wildly different strengths. Because again, right, the goal with collaboration is we're all moving towards some kind of common goal, some kind of objective that we can accomplish together, right? It's all about leveraging team strengths. And, right, we've all driven down the highway and probably seen a version of this picture at some point where there's one person in the hole that's using the shovel, digging it, and everybody else is kind of leaning on the shovel like that. No one wants to be on that kind of team, especially if you're the guy in the hole that's digging it. That's no fun. If we got to dig a hole, well, let's all get in there and let's start hucking out the dirt so we can get this thing done faster. So, how do we create a team that works together effectively and leverages our various strengths? Well, at Kolbe, we've been working with teams for 50 years. And in that time, we've been able to identify some common challenges that pop up over and over and over again. One of them is too much of the same energy. So, right, let's say we have a bunch of folks like Lori who have an 8 in fact finder. That's awesome because they're dotting every I, they're crossing every T. But sometimes they could get a little lost in analysis paralysis, get lost in the weeds or the details, right? And this happens for various reasons. Sometimes that's what the job requires, right? Maybe you're working with an attorney, a financial advisor, your accountant, an architect. You want them to be very, very precise, right? That's a strength that is needed in that kind of role. And so sometimes teams end up having everybody like that. Or the alternative is you're sitting there interviewing someone and you say, hey, tell me about a time when you were faced with this kind of challenge. If they solve it the way you would solve it, that candidate is a genius. They're going to be a valuable member of the team. We have to bring them on board. And so you end up with people that are just like you. So that's the first issue that we see, which often then leads to this next issue, which is not enough of a given strength. If all of us are focused on the minute details, who's looking at the big picture, making sure that, hey, we're still roughly pointing in the right direction? And then finally, the last challenge that we often see with teams is what we call group conflict or polarization. So I'm not talking about, name calling or open warfare here. What I'm more talking about is think of a bunch of 7 through 10s and a bunch of 1s, 2s, and 3s, right? It's hard to bridge that gap between the two. So we need those 4s, 5s, and 6s in the middle to find some common ground from both of the sides, and sometimes to play referee between the two sides. So these are just issues that we've identified that pop up over and over again when you get people together working as a team. What's also important is figuring out, how does your team operate? How do they roll? How do they get stuff done? And it turns out there's 3 different kinds of teams. The first is a very collaborative team. Think of a basketball team on defense. If you watch the overhead of a basketball team, of a basketball game, it's almost like all 5 members are moving in unison, even though they're, 5, 10, 15 feet away from each other on the court. They have to work, all 5 need each other in order to be successful. That's a very collaborative team. But there are also very, very independent teams where they don't need each other to be successful. They may train together, maybe they share some best practices with each other, but when it's game day, each person goes out and does their own thing. Think of swimming in the Olympics, right? You may have 2 Americans and 2 Russians and 2 Brazilians all going for the gold, even though they're all on Team USA or Team Brazil. And then there's a third kind of team. Third kind of team is a hybrid. And like the name describes, it's a mix of both, where sometimes we work together and sometimes we're on our own, right? So senior leadership teams are often like this. Senior team comes together, they develop the strategy of, hey, here's what we're going to do in the next quarter, year, 3 years. Cool. We're moving in that direction. Now, sales goes and does sales things. Finance goes and does finance things. Ops goes and does, operations and delivery types of things. And they make sure they don't mess each other up, but they're kind of running on their own. It doesn't actually matter which one of these teams you are. What matters is that everybody's on the same page. Because if Lori and I are on a team together, and Lori thinks we're a very collaborative team, and I think we're a very independent team, well, now I look like I'm not a very good team player. I'm a lone wolf. I don't play well with others, whatever, right? However you want to describe that, that may not actually be the case. It may just be that I think I'm supposed to be independent, but Lori thinks that we're supposed to be collaborative. But if we can get on the same page, now we can work together in the most efficient way possible. So, how do you figure this stuff out? How does our team operate? We created a free survey all of you can absolutely take, and you can share it with your teammates as well. So, if you go to teamsurvey.kolbe.com, it's a quick 7-question assessment, and it will identify how you see your team. Maybe it's independent, maybe collaborative, or hybrid. Great information. Where the fun really happens is when you share that with the rest of your teammates, and then you compare notes. Do we all think we're collaborative? Do we all think we're independent? Are we somewhere in between? Do we have polar opposites? Just know you want everybody on the same page. We all think we're independent? Awesome. We all think we're collaborative? Just as awesome, but we need everybody on the same page. The reason this is important is as you start looking to figure out what's the right mix of Kolbe strengths for my team, the kind of team you are makes a difference. If it's independent, it doesn't really matter. You actually don't want a mix of strengths. You want to find what works and go with that. If it's hybrid or collaborative, then you do actually want a balance of the various strengths. So it turns out you want about 25% of the strengths in that 1 to 3 range. You want 25% in that 7 to 10 range, and half, 50%, in that 4 to 6 range. So this, again, is an ideal mix of strengths for a team. What does this look like in real life? So I have a real life team on my screen here, and this chart is set up just like the Kolbe result. You got your 4 colorful bars, and then we simply just say, what percentage of the team is in that 1 to 3 range? What percentage in the 4 to 6 and 7 through 10? So if you're looking at this team here, I'm gonna focus on that red one called Fact Finder for now. You can see 14% of this team is in that 1, 2, or 3 range in Fact Finder. It's one person. You can see 15%, also one person. It's in that middle range, 4 through 6, and the rest of the team is in that 7 through 10 range. So looking at this, you can now make some predictions about how this team is going to operate. This team may sometimes get stuck in some analysis paralysis. They may, get lost in the weeds, lost on the details, and they may miss the big picture. And when you all signed up for this, we had you, enter in the normal, contact information, but we also asked you a question about what you're interested in learning about teams. And a common question we got was, how do we work as a team using our Kolbe results? So that chart I just showed you is absolutely one way to do it, because you can think of it kind of like a trend report, but you can also use it like this. If we identify where each person falls, now we know who to go to for what. So we're going to focus now on that blue column, follow through. Let's say we're creating a brand new system for how we're going to do something. I'm going to start in the bottom with James, who is a 7 in follow through. James is naturally going to lay out a step-by-step guide. He thinks in terms of, right, I got to do this, then I got to do this, then I got to do this, then I got to do this. So if you need a process built, James is your guy. Let him do that. Let him lay out all 15 steps that need to get done. Then I'm going to go from the bottom up to the top. I'm going to grab either David or Stephanie, and I'm going to say, hey guys, now I want you to go through this process that James built. What they're naturally going to do is they're going to spot, you know what? We don't need this one. And we don't need this one either. And we can combine these two things. Now we've gone from 15 steps to 11 or 12 steps. Then I'm going to grab somebody in the middle, whether it's Toby or Amy, Diane, or Lori. I'm going to say, hey, now go through this one last time. Their gift is they smooth out the rough edges. They make the machine, that process, work that much better because they spot those inefficiencies. Now, what we've done is we've created the ultimate brand new process that uses everyone on the team's strengths. So, there are many examples of how you can use each other's strengths, but what I will tell you is this: all of us are amazing at something, but none of us are amazing at everything. So, for those areas where you're not as amazing, find a teammate who is amazing at that stuff and lean on them. And I know there are lots of other questions that you all may have, so we're going to open it up. And please, in the chat, feel free to ask away anything you want to know about Kolbe results, collaboration, communication, working together as a team. Lori and I will happily answer.
Hey, Eric, people like your deck, just so
Awesome.
you know. So they'd asked if you would share the deck. I know that we're going to be doing sending out the recording. That's typically what we do, correct?
Yeah, so Dee, like I said, right, she makes sure that this process runs smoothly. Pretty sure she set it up so that I believe tomorrow or the next day you'll get a link to the recorded webinar. I noticed we had some Kolbe certified consultants here on the webinar. 99% of the slides that I've showed are available in the Certified Consultant Center. So if you're certified, go to the CCC. You can get those slides. If you're not a certified consultant, you absolutely get access to a recording of this webinar. What else can I help with, everybody, about teams or collaboration or working with other people? So again, as you look at, right, the folks around you, whether it's colleagues, teammates, people that work for you, just know there are amazing superpowers locked inside of that person. Your job is to figure out, how do we unleash them? Their superpowers are all listed right here. If you can just let them do their four numbers, they are going to be at their best. They're going to be an awesome teammate that gets a whole bunch of stuff done, and you're going to crush your results. What sometimes happens, though, is because we're people, we think in terms of, right, well, why wouldn't you do it my way? Well, sometimes your way is the worst idea for that other person. So when you're working with others, take their strengths into account and see how we can get them to lean into it. All right, so Joel has a question. Can the Kolbe use to identify the perfect candidate for a specific position? Yes, absolutely. I'm going to give you the short version, but Lori will put a link to our hiring page in the chat. Very simply, what we do is we build a model for a job. And there's two parts to building the model. One part is, how does the job need to get done? And the second part is, how does the leader of that position, how do they naturally do things? Because you have to work well with your boss. We combine those two pieces together. That gives you the model. Then we look at candidates and say, is this person really solid fit? Are they pretty close? Or am I trying to fit a square peg into a round hole? What I will tell you, and our data will back this up, this is not a good idea. Even if you love that person, they have an amazing experience, and they used to work at one of your competitors, and you think they're fantastic, you're their best friend, you are setting them up to fail if you're asking them to not be themselves all day long. So this is, again, it's a very simple process. We can help you walk through it, but you want to identify what's needed in the job, and then you can absolutely identify what is the right Kolbe for that position.
Couple of great questions. Helmut had questions about weekly department manager meetings run by one of the leadership team can feel really autocratic. How do we make it feel like people are more participating?
Yeah, and obviously, Helmut, I don't know the mix of strengths on your team, but oftentimes what we find is, let's say if I have someone like Lori and I just randomly pull her into a meeting. I'm like walking down the hall and I'm like, Lori, I need you, jump in here with me real quick. It's going to take her a minute to process, to kind of synthesize and see, what the heck are we talking about? What are we trying to solve for? What's the end game? Like, she's trying to pull all these pieces together. And so in the beginning, she's a little bit more quiet, right? If instead, ahead of these weekly meetings, what if I sent out like an agenda. Hey, everybody, here are the three things we're going to tackle in our, Wednesday morning meeting or whatever. Now it gives her time to do a little bit of homework, to start a little bit of issue processing inside of her own head. Now, when she jumps in, she's ready to participate. So that's one example. Again, it's going to depend on the mix of strengths you have on your team, but hopefully that helps, Helmet.
Uh, Mike had another question. Let's say you had an idea, right? You made up an idea. The team you put together did the thing. Then who keeps it repeating?
Great question. So we're kind of, Michael, in your question, we're kind of jumping around the different modes, right? So the idea, the make it up part, that's my 9 and quick start there, which is always firing and always making stuff up. So that's a component. Then you got the team to build it, and that's a combination of different strengths. Once that system, that process is built, and we say, all right, here's how we do this thing, what we want to find is somebody like Lori in that 4 through 6 range in follow through. Because their gift is they take a look at what's already created and they just make sure that it runs like a well-oiled machine. So if it's something's already built, you just want to make sure it keeps getting done and done better and better each time. Go grab somebody like Lori. Want to say thank you to all of you for joining us, from myself, Lori, Deani, the rest of the Kolbe team. We really, really appreciate it. I see some questions coming in, so we're going to continue to help. If you want more info, if there's other things we can do to help, kolbe.com/Kolbe Live or email info@kolbe.com. Again, if you have people inside of your organization, we absolutely can and would love to help. So reach out to us by going to kolbe.com/Kolbe Live or email info@kolbe.com. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the week.